They said passenger comfort like I was a seatbelt that didn't click, not a person with a name, a ticket, and a purpose. The captain stood in the aisle with that calm, practiced face pilots use when the coffee maker breaks, and he said it again. For passenger comfort, we'll need you to deplane. People turned phones angled up like periscopes. I felt my cheeks burn. I'd been quiet since boarding headphones off for takeoff like the card said notebook open highlighter uncapped. I was headed to the National Aeroscience Symposium in Denver finalist at 17, a shot I'd earned by mapping high-altitude wind shear like it was a living thing. Still here, I was being told my existence made somebody uncomfortable. Which passenger, I asked, trying to keep my voice flat, not shaky. The flight attendant, Melissa, the badge red, shifted on her heels and glanced at the woman in 3C pearls tailored blazer face pinched like she'd bitten a lemon. The woman barely looked up, just smoothed her skirt and murmured, "I didn't say anything about her." I said the energy felt off. The captain nodded like that was a safety metric. "Miss, it's a discretion call. Please gather your things." The security officer arrived with the stance of a man who wanted this over before lunch. "Let's make it easy," he said, light touch to my elbow. My backpack strap dug into my shoulder as I stood. The aisle felt a mile long with every phone watching. People who'd smiled at me 10 minutes ago suddenly discovered the fascinating world of tray tables. A little boy asked his mom too loud, "Why's the science girl leaving?" I swallowed the answer that caught in my throat and kept moving. In the jet bridge, I asked, "Can I make a call?" The officer nodded because there were cameras here too. I pressed Dad's name and turned from the door so no one could read my face. "They're removing me," I said. Silence, then the kind that means a storm is forming. "Tell the captain I want him on the phone," Dad said. "He won't take it." "Where are you, Gate B14? I'm on my way." "Don't sign anything. Record everything. You hear me?" "Nyla?" I heard him. I heard every talk from every road trip, every keep your head high, every you can be right and still be turned into the problem. I opened my camera and hit record. Melissa brushed past with the brisk air of someone who's been told this is protocol. I filmed the gate screen, the officer's badge, the board that said on time, even though time had stalled for me. My dad, Andre Brooks, was supposed to be across town at Orion Aerospace, giving a talk about composite skins that flex under stress and snap back without a scar. He's the kind of engineer whose name sits quietly in footnotes on things that cross the sky. He also owns one jacket he wears to big day's Navy with an Orion patch and his name stitched in thread that catches the light. He left that podium mid-sentence. I know because later one of his colleagues sent a photo microphone on the lectern slide, half-changed empty space where he'd stood. When he walked into the terminal, I felt my lungs expand for the first time since the aisle. He didn't come charging like a movie hero. He came steady, jaw set, eyes taking in the scene. In one sweep me the officer, the blinking gate light that means delay the cluster of airline suits peeking from behind the desk like meerkats. "Who made the call?" he asked, voice even. Nobody volunteered. He stepped to the counter. "I'm Andre Brooks. That's my daughter. Show me the policy that allows you to evict a ticketed passenger because someone didn't like the energy in 3A. "Sir, the captain has final authority," the gate agent said. "Passenger comfort is not a legal standard." Dad cut in, and his voice stayed controlled in that way that makes people listen. Safety is. Behavior is. Not vibes. I saw the officer's mouth twitch, sympathy or nerves I couldn't tell. Dad turned to me softer. "You okay?" "Humiliated," I said. "But yeah." He nodded once, then lifted his phone. "We're recording. We'll do this on the jet bridge." They tried to stop him at the door. He didn't push. He didn't shout. He held up his badge, government contractor clearance from days testing prototypes in restricted airspace, and said, "I'm not here to fly. I'm here to correct a civil rights problem you created." Melissa wavered, looked toward the cockpit. The captain appeared again. Tall silver hair, that same calm mask. "Sir, we can discuss this inside." "We'll discuss it where the harm occurred," Dad said, and stepped on board. You could taste the tension. Everyone had their phones up now. Some had that guilty look like they wished they'd stood up sooner. 3C stared at the window like the tarmac had life advice. Dad kept his camera steady and his tone measured. "Captain Halverson, tell me what policy my daughter violated." He didn't answer. "Not exactly. We had multiple complaints about comfort," he said, eyes flicking to the woman in 3C and back. "It's at my discretion." "Then discretion failed you," Dad said. "You accommodated bias and punished a kid who did everything right. You taught this cabin that bigotry is a seat upgrade." A couple of passengers clapped the soft, nervous kind people do when they're not sure if it helps. 3C opened and closed her mouth like she was picking which version of herself to be on camera. The airline's crisis team showed up like it was prom swimsuits. Fresh hair, a man with a pocket square who introduced himself as operations. He offered vouchers first, then enhanced customer service, then a private room. Dad stood in the aisle and shook his head each time. "This happened publicly," he said. "We'll fix it publicly." While they negotiated, I did the only thing that felt like mine. I stood. "Can I say something?" I asked, and nobody told me no. The cabin hummed with that charged quiet right before a storm breaks. "I'm Nyla," I said, "and I'm tired. Not physically. This is my first flight of the day, but tired in the bone-deep way that comes from being good and still being seen as a problem. I wore the blazer my mom liked. I printed my research in triplicate. I said, 'Yes, ma'am,' and 'No, sir.' And I kept my backpack zipped because God forbid a headphone cord looks like defiance. And still someone decided I made their space feel wrong. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. Phones leaned closer on their own. 'I study turbulence,' I said, and a couple of people smiled like, 'Okay, let her cook.' In the upper air currents collide in ways you can't always see from the ground. And if you're not honest about what's happening, you get tossed. It's not the bump that breaks you, it's pretending the bump isn't there. Today, the bump is bias. We all saw it. We felt the plane tilt. So we either correct, or we crash the part of ourselves that knows better." In 3C, the woman's pearls looked heavier. She whispered, "I never said race like that absolved anything." From row 5, a dad said, "Nobody has to say it." That video, the one where Dad asked for the policy and I talked about turbulence, did numbers before we pushed back from the gate. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Seat 3A, turbulence is bias. Transcon Air. News alerts pinged. Somebody tweeted our names wrong, then got them right, then quoted my line about bumps like it was a lyric. The airline's stock dipped a point, then 3, because outrage is faster than fuel. A woman in row 2 leaned over, eyes glassy. "They made my son move last month," she said. Said his seatmate felt unsafe. He was 8. Dad looked at the captain. "This is a pattern. You can end it right now." "Sir, we can rebook you both," the ops man started. "We're not leaving," Dad said. "She's going back to her seat in first class because she earned it, and you're going to apologize on this intercom to every person watching you try to sweep this under the carpet." The captain set his jaw. "Mr. Brooks, if you don't deplane, I'll have you removed." The 2 airport security officers who had been cautious shadows near the door shifted. One cleared his throat. "With respect, Captain," he said, voice low but carrying, "we're not putting hands on a parent protecting his minor child from what looks on video like discrimination." Our supervisor agrees. You could feel the captain's authority fray like an overused lanyard. He looked toward the galley away back at Dad. He didn't apologize. He just deflated, and when he did, the ops man's phone started buzzing so hard it rattled. He listened, went pale, then lifted the intercom like it weighed 20 pounds. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "Transcontinental Air recognizes that an error in judgment has occurred today. Miss Brooks will return to her assigned seat. We apologize to her and to all of you for the delay. It wasn't enough, but it was something." Dad didn't smile. He's allergic to half measures. "Names," he said. "Commitments. On the record." "Sir," the ops man said, "our CEO will speak to you directly." He did 10 minutes later, patched through on speaker so the whole cabin could hear. "Mr. Brooks, Ms. Brooks, this is Mia Caldwell," she said, and her voice had that tightness people have when they're choosing truth over legal polish. What happened on our aircraft violates our values. Effective immediately, Captain Halverson and Flight Attendant Crow are suspended pending termination review. We're implementing bias intervention training across the company and appointing an external counsel to audit complaints. I am sorry. Dad didn't let it land easy. An apology without change is PR, he said. Send it in writing. Start a scholarship for students from underrepresented communities in aerospace. Publish your complaint numbers quarterly with outcomes, not spin. And you will say, my daughter's name when you apologize because you erased it on this plane. We'll do all of it, she said quick, like she knew the stock was watching too. They found a new crew. 3C asked to be moved to the back and left with her sunglasses on indoors, which is a costume and a confession. When we finally lifted the cab and exhaled as one body, Dad tapped my arm. You still know your opening, he asked. I did. I closed my eyes and saw the slide deck in my head, jet streams like rivers, my algorithm like a hand learning the current's mood. I fell asleep to the engine's white noise, and for the first time that day, I dreamed without defense. Denver looked like a postcard dipped in blue. The symposium buzzed with kids in stiff shoes and hopeful smiles. Word had spread. I felt it in the way heads turned, but when I stepped up for my 15 minutes, the room tilted back to center. Here, the rules were simple. Your math either sang or it didn't. Good afternoon, I said. I'm Nyla Brooks. My project models vertical shear interactions that make flights feel like God shook the table. They laughed, and the laugh uncoiled something in me. I moved through the data like a song I'd been humming alone for months, showed how we could reroute around invisible bruises in the air and save fuel without flirting with danger. A judge asked how long it would take to integrate with existing flight planning systems. Not long, I said. I built it as a layer, not a replacement. You don't tear up the road, you paint clearer lines. When they announced the awards, I didn't need a first to feel whole. Second glinted on the ribbon like enough. The head judge shook my hand and whispered, You turned a storm into an instrument. I think I'll keep that one for days when the world feels loud. Back at the hotel, my phone pinged with the statement posted everywhere, full-page ads and all. They used my name. They didn't say regret the inconvenience. They said, We removed a young woman from her rightful seat because a passenger was uncomfortable sitting next to her. We were wrong. It was the kind of apology that costs something. They also announced the Brooks Fellowship. Funny how fast a board moves when a million eyes are on it. $500, $1,000 a year for students like me who love the sky and refuse to be told where their place is. Dad read it, sighed, and finally let his shoulders drop. It's a start, he said. Let's make sure it's not the finish. 6 months later, I stood at a mic in a high school auditorium that still smelled like fresh wax, looking out at 30 kids who'd come to our first meeting of Black and Brown Future Flyers. The banner we'd printed with scholarship money hung a little crooked, and I loved it more for that. We'll talk about calculus, I said, and also about TSA lines and how to say no, like a complete sentence. We'll talk about engines and about power, who has it, how they use it, how we take up space anyway. Dad sat in the front row, next to a couple of Orion engineers he'd roped into mentoring. He wears his jacket less now and his chair title more. The airline made him head of that external council, and he's turned meetings into mirrors. Every quarter, Transcon publishes numbers they'd rather hide. Every quarter, people argue in the comments like change isn't a choice. Good. Friction makes heat. Heat makes lift. People still send the video sometimes. Seat 3A girl, this made me cry in the break room, or I didn't help someone once. I will next time. 3C lost her job for a minute, then got another one, then disappeared into a timeline that doesn't belong to me. The captain is fighting his termination with statements about protocol. Maybe he believes them. Maybe he can't stand the thought that he built a life on judgment and got judged. When I fly now, I still get the extra swab sometimes. I still see the double take at the ticket scanner when first class lights up next to my name. I still pack the blazer my mom liked. But here's the thing. When the bump comes, I don't pretend we're level. I name it like a pilot names a chop and keeps a hand on the yoke. We're encountering some rough air, you say into the mic, and the cabin breathes because you told the truth. So tell me, if you'd been in 2D that day, what would you have done? Looked down or looked up and said, "No, not today." Do you think the captain should lose his wings? Or should a person who chooses the hard apology get a second chance? Is public shaming a price for private harm? Or does it teach the next person to keep quiet? Drop your take in the comments. Be brave. Be real. If this story hit something you've seen or felt, hit like so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe for more true stories about power bias and the people who refuse to stay small. And tell me one thing. Have you ever turned your own turbulence into lift?